walked into his office. He said, "Are you Horowitz?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, you're not exactly what we expected."
They were beloved by millions, but off-screen, these stars were slaves to the bottle. What really went on behind closed doors in classic Hollywood? The answer is as tragic as it is jaw-dropping. Number 25, Michael Landon. Ever wonder how a beloved TV dad could hide such a dark secret? Michael Landon's double life was clouded by alcohol and painkillers. Michael Landon, known for his roles on Bonanza and Little House on the Prairie, was the pinnacle of the clean, well-respected man on television. He did it for decades, but he had an addiction to alcohol and Valium that constantly clouded the perfect picture. His co-stars knew that he drank some, but they had no idea just how much he was drinking on set. Landon would spike his coffee with whiskey and other soft drinks with vodka. After filming was completed for the day, they would head out to the bar to continue drinking more. Landon's Little House daughter Melissa Gilbert stated that as a kid, she didn't know he sipped vodka from his coffee mug. But, quote, "I'm sure he's one reason why I always picked men who smelled like alcohol." Along with drinking and painkillers, he smoked 4 packs of unfiltered cigarettes a day, which likely influenced the onset of pancreatic cancer that eventually killed him. He was just 54 years old.
Edith Piaf and Marie Chevalier. That to me is why I'm here.
Number 24, Dean Martin. How much of Dean Martin's famous onstage persona was real? The truth about his drinking habits might surprise you. The King of Cool once stated, quote, "I feel sorry for people who don't drink. When they wake up in the morning, that's as good as they're going to feel all day." Much of Martin's performing persona was based on being a lovable drunk, although his daughter and other close friends have claimed that it was all an act and Dino just had apple juice in his glass. It was just the drink and cigarette in his hand that made him more revered. Men wanted to be him, and women wanted to be with him. But he was a kind father, always home for dinner, and only had one cocktail with his wife during the evening. So although Dean Martin's career is alcohol-related, he seems to have danced with the devil, but knew the right time to call it quits. Dean passed away in 1995 at the age of 78.
Accepted the fact that I'm sort of an adult now. But she, like all mothers, is ever watchful.
Number 23, Elizabeth Taylor. How does a Hollywood icon openly admit her biggest battle? Elizabeth Taylor wasn't just famous for her beauty. Her addiction was groundbreaking. Liz Taylor was known for her beauty and talent on the silver screen, but she struggled with alcoholism for decades, as well as getting addicted to painkillers. Taylor was the first celebrity to admit herself into the Betty Ford Center in 1983. Betty Ford, the wife of U.S. President Gerald Ford, had struggled with the same addictions before getting the help she needed in 1978 and later opened the Rehabilitation Center to help others. Elizabeth more than likely had no idea the profound effect her willingness to face her addiction had on others suffering in silence.
In 1819 in England, 10 people tried to murder the whole of the British cabinet.
Number 22, Robert Shaw. Ever wonder what fueled the tension on the set of Jaws? Robert Shaw's scotch-soaked days made filming a nightmare for everyone involved. Big sharks, choppy water, and testy coworkers made the filming of 1975's Jaws an absolute nightmare for most of the people involved. Robert Shaw sipped on scotch during long filming days, causing tension between him and his co-star Richard Dreyfuss. Shaw was drunk in most of the film, with the exception of one scene, the scene where his character actually gets drunk. Richard Dreyfuss later stated that he liked Shaw when he was sober, but couldn't stand the man drunk. Once, Dreyfuss actually took a glass of booze out of Shaw's hand and dumped it overboard into the ocean.
And I'm about to take it to my mouth, but of course my hands won't obey me. They fly all over the place.
Number 21, Richard Burton. 2 to 3 bottles of vodka a day? Richard Burton's reputation wasn't just about his talent. It was about surviving his own destructive habits. Naturally, moving from Taylor to ex-husband Burton makes sense. And imagine drinking 2 to 3 bottles of vodka a day. That's what Richard Burton did at the height of his alcoholism in the 70s. He had a reputation in Hollywood for hardcore drinking and didn't care who knew about it. He once told a director, "I am not drinking on your film. Only problem was that meant 1 bottle of vodka for the day." Burton stated that he's sober, even while on 2 bottles, but when he's drinking, it is 3 or more. One of his most iconic roles was 1966's Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, playing the hard-drinking college professor. Wouldn't you know it, he was phenomenal and was nominated for an Oscar. Burton continued boozing, and while filming The Klansman in '74, he had to film many of his scenes sitting or lying down because he couldn't keep his balance. After filming the movie, he checked himself into lockdown rehab to dry out. He had been in the midst of a nasty divorce with Elizabeth Taylor and was finally ready to sober up. Sadly, the damage was done. Richard suffered from cirrhosis of the liver and kidney disease. He died in 1984 at just 58 years old.
I send our warmest congratulations on this tribute and our best wishes to everyone there.
Number 20, Carrie Grant. Think LSD was a wild treatment? Carrie Grant took extreme measures to combat his alcohol issues and found a bizarre way to cope. Carrie Grant had a problem with alcohol and decided to get help in the 50s to cure his problem. To cure Grant's alcoholism, his doctor prescribed a new drug at the time, LSD. Grant loved the trips he took on the drug and introduced some of his friends to it. Julie Balaban, the daughter of Paramount's president, quoted, "I figured if it was good enough for Cary Grant, it was good enough for me." Grant is believed to have taken LSD about 100 times while being treated. But it changed his outlook on life, and he lived happily until passing away at the age of 82.
Changed the reading, and I said, fascinating. And that, I think, was where we really found the spark of the character.
Number 19, Leonard Nimoy. Mr. Spock's cold logic hid a tragic truth. Leonard Nimoy's journey with alcohol nearly derailed his life and career. Leonard Nimoy, or should I say Mr. Spock, battled an alcohol addiction while filming the iconic Star Trek. Nimoy later stated that he began drinking to cope with the long days on the Star Trek set. William Shatner stated that Nimoy drank to numb the sheer disappointment of stardom. And 1 drink turned into 2, and before Leonard knew it, his addictive personality kicked in and he couldn't stop. He entered rehab once filming for the show had ended. Nimoy lived until his other habit of smoking took his life at the age of 83.
It lies somewhere in between. It was a journey back from Japan.
Number 18, Peter O'Toole. He was known for his unforgettable blue eyes and stellar performances, but Peter O'Toole also had a notorious love for booze. It's hard to imagine that someone with bright, shining blue eyes like Peter O'Toole would have been one of Hollywood's leading alcoholics. He once told David Letterman that drinking was something that his generation just did, regardless whether they had things to do that day or not. O'Toole claimed that alcohol enhanced his performances on the big screen. Do you remember the scene where Lawrence of Arabia completed a camel raid? Well, apparently O'Toole and his co-star Omar Sharif were both afraid of camels, so they decided to be completely drunk for the entire scene. They don't call it liquid courage for nothing. O'Toole laughs when people ask him about the scene because he doesn't remember it.
We will now do the national anthem, but you needn't rise.
Number 17, Frank Sinatra. For old Blue Eyes, a drink of Jack Daniels was never far away. Frank Sinatra's legendary drinking habits were as iconic as his voice. Frank Sinatra was what many people considered a functioning alcoholic. He claimed that Jack Daniels was his favorite. His signature drink was 4 ice cubes, 2 fingers of Jack, and a splash of water in a traditional rocks glass. It's rumored that he drank an entire bottle of Jack Daniels by himself daily. His doctor was shocked. Sinatra lived in the spotlight wherever he went. I guess you could say that he lived by the mantra, "The best is yet to come." But this was not always the case. Sinatra could turn mean when he was drunk. Sometimes he picked fights with journalists or fellow actors. You had to be careful. One of his wives said that she locked herself in their room when she saw him drinking gin because that's when he became mean. Frank, his buddies, and a few other Hollywood elites were dubbed the American Olympic Drinking Team. Sinatra passed away in 1998 at the age of 82. He was buried with a bottle of Jack Daniels in his casket.
Hi, good morning, beautiful.
Number 16. W.C. Fields. Ever heard of lemonade with a kick? For W.C. Fields, his lemonade was usually 100% gin, and he didn't hide it. William Claude Duncanfield was born above a bar during pre-Prohibition times. When the government cracked down on booze and made it illegal, the young drunk stashed thousands of bottles of whiskey and gin in his attic. Even after Prohibition was lifted, he still continued to keep an abundant supply of emergency liquor in his home just in case. While on set, Fields would always carry a vacuum flask filled with gin martinis that he could call his lemonade. Humorously, there's this one time that some kind of wise guy swapped out his gin with actual lemonade, prompting Fields to furiously cry out, "Who put lemonade in my lemonade?"
I just want to pay a slight, as a matter of fact, a very big tribute to Mr. John Huston.
Number 15. Humphrey Bogart. Hollywood's tough guy wasn't just acting. Humphrey Bogart's scarred past and bar brawls showed his true alcohol-fueled temper. Depending on which studio publicist you listen to, Humphrey Bogart either got his signature scar above his lip in a fistfight as a kid, after being decked by a prisoner he was transporting when he was a sailor in the Navy, or after taking shrapnel during a battle while he was a crewman on the USS Leviathan. But if you ask any of his old drinking buddies, they would tell you that Humphrey got that scar during one of his countless drunken barroom brawls, back when he used to frequent the Prohibition-era illicit drinking establishments of New York City. While honing his craft as a Broadway actor, Bogart became infamous for drinking until he was no longer conscious at the bar. Whenever someone tried to wake him, he would always be quick to try and pick a fight. His violent tendencies, coupled with his drinking habits, got him kicked off more than one stage production. But that didn't stop him from gaining enough recognition to eventually make the move out to Hollywood to pursue a career as a movie star. Number 14. Spencer Tracy. This Hollywood legend was far from a fun drunk. Spencer Tracy's darker side revealed itself whenever he hit the bottle. Spencer Tracy was a man that no one ever thought of as a fun drunk. When Tracy got drunk, he was known to turn real mean. Everyone knew that he had a tendency towards violence whenever he hit the bottle, and he hit the bottle a lot. He often found himself in heated bar fights, arrested by the cops, and one time even woke up in a padded room in a Chicago mental hospital. This two-time Oscar winner wasn't necessarily drunk all the time. He would try to stay sober for long stretches of time, but eventually he would always find his way back to the liquor store. As soon as booze would touch his lips after a dry spell, he would be off to the races. Tracy would often recluse himself up in his hotel rooms for weeks on end. He spent a lot of time soaking in the bathtub, just sipping on his poison, not even getting up to relieve himself. Tracy's drinking eventually got so bad that Fox threatened to fire him if he didn't quit. In response to their ultimatum, Tracy stormed out of the office and walked to the bar across the street. After getting absolutely hammered, he returned to the office and proceeded to make a scene. Number 13. Judy Garland. The voice behind Somewhere Over the Rainbow hid a tragic reality. Judy Garland was consumed by addiction that no one could control. Judy Garland, the legendary actress and singer, famous for her role as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, faced a lifelong struggle with alcohol and substance abuse. Fighting addiction, Garland sought solace in alcohol, prescription sedatives, and stimulants. There were, however, short periods in her life when she attempted to get clean, but she was never able to stay off the drugs and alcohol. Garland spent her life struggling to overcome many personal problems, including addiction, to no avail. She was found dead by her last husband, Mickey Deans, on June 22, 1969. She was living in Chelsea, London, when she died at the age of 47. The cause of death was an accidental overdose of barbiturates.
Speaking of friend Moswell, I wonder where he is. Probably out lassoing some ferocious gazelle or something.
Number 12, Ava Gardner. She was one of Hollywood's most beautiful stars, but Ava Gardner's personal life was overshadowed by alcohol-fueled chaos and toxic relationships. Despite her undeniable beauty and talent, Ava Gardner's love for alcohol was well documented throughout her tumultuous personal life. Ava Gardner, renowned for her beauty and acting talent, also struggled with alcohol addiction throughout her life. Her drinking was a significant aspect of her personal struggles, influencing her relationships and career. Gardner's addiction to alcohol often led her into tumultuous and abusive relationships, including those with her husbands Mickey Rooney and Artie Shaw, and her affair with George C. Scott, who reportedly beat her when drunk. Her heavy drinking contributed to her reputation as a hard-living Hollywood star, often leading to public incidences and private turmoil. Despite her attempts to cope with the pressures of fame and personal insecurities, Gardner's addiction remained a constant battle until her death. She suffered from several health issues related to her lifestyle, including a stroke later in life.
If a girl's spending all of her time worrying about the money she doesn't have, how is she going to have any time for being in love?
Number 11, Marilyn Monroe. The world's biggest sex symbol couldn't escape her demons. Marilyn Monroe's addiction and tragic end remain Hollywood's most infamous tale. The iconic sex symbol, Marilyn Monroe, grappled with personal demons and alcohol, became an unfortunate companion during her short life. And there's no question that being addicted to alcohol and drugs is an intense experience for anyone. It's as though the forces of life and death are pulling on you, and the addiction claims your soul. After many films, performances, marriages, and steadily becoming an icon and sex symbol, Monroe eventually began to deteriorate. She suffered from depression, anxiety, insomnia, and many health problems. Her health required a variety of medical drugs, which created a growing addiction. She also developed a dependence on alcohol and other drugs, and in 1959, those addictions started to affect her health. There's no question that Monroe's early childhood, inner life, and stressful career contributed to her growing addictions. Monroe, who struggled or has struggled with addiction, saw the continued choice to get drunk destroy the body, healthy thinking, and impair the maturity of the adult. The choice for drinking or drugging is a self-abusive habit. That self-abusive habit ended in suicide. Of course, the cycle of addiction doesn't have to be destructive forever. The choice to find sober help at a women's sober living facility, to quit drinking, and to stop using drugs is a life-affirming choice.
Of course I like you.
Pour me a glass.
Number 10, Barbara Payton. Her rise was fast, but her fall was even quicker. Barbara Payton's Hollywood stardom was quickly eclipsed by her love for the bottle. Starting out as a small-town Minnesota girl, this gorgeous blonde ran off to Hollywood, and it wasn't long before she became one of the biggest stars of the 1940s and 50s, starring alongside acting greats like James Cagney, Gary Cooper, and Gregory Peck. However, Payton's personal life was a chaotic disaster, chock full of affairs with seemingly every man she encountered, violent relationships, shoplifting, prostitution, and numerous run-ins with the police. The only thing that seemed to offer any stability to this troubled actress was the bottle. Primarily in the 1960s, her alcoholism worsened. After losing custody of her son during her debauched lifestyle, Payton's life unraveled even further. For instance, in 1962, she was charged with public drunkenness after being found sleeping at a Sunset Boulevard bus stop, dressed in a coat and bathing suit, and she was arrested that same year for drunk and disorderly conduct during a boisterous afternoon party. It wasn't long after that she was spending night after night in bars and pubs, and at the age of 39, she was found dead of heart and liver disease, her appearance so altered that she could hardly be identified.
Everybody expects that I'm going to make a fool of myself or an absolute ass, and so I generally do.
Number 9, Oliver Reed. Britain's notorious bad boy didn't hold back when it came to booze. Oliver Reed's wild lifestyle was the stuff of legend and tragedy. During the late 60s and early 70s, this English actor was one of the biggest box office draws in Britain, renowned for his performances in films like The Trap, Oliver, and the Three Musketeers series. His persona off-screen wasn't as charming as those he played for the camera. He once confessed that he did not live in the world of sobriety. No truer words could have been spoken. Fellow actor and producer David Hemmings claimed that Reed could drink 20 pints of lager with a gin or creme de menthe chaser and still run a mile for a wager, and that he once drank 126 pints of beer in 24 hours and then performed a horizontal handstand on the bar. Known for wreaking havoc during his inebriated states, which included tomfoolery, violence, and infidelity, stories of his actions while intoxicated abound. In 1980, for instance, he went to a church for a christening so drunk that he swayed back and forth while standing, and at a reception held later, he held the baby in his arms and stumbled up and down the room pretending to play rugby with the child as the ball. He was also known for exposing his tattooed penis in public, bringing attention to it as his mighty mallet. He once climbed a chimney naked, pretending to be Santa Claus, urinated on the Australian flag, and lay drunk on an airport baggage conveyor. Before he had completed the shooting of his final film, Gladiator, he went to a pub one night and drank 8 bottles of beer, 3 bottles of rum, and a few shots of whiskey, before finally suffering a heart attack and dying shortly after. Looking back at his fascinating life, Reed often claimed that he had just one regret, which was that he didn't drink every pub dry and sleep with every woman on the planet.
No, but if tomorrow or next week I should need your help...
Well, you know where I am, same hotel.
Number 8, Errol Flynn. Hollywood's ultimate bad boy was a master of sword fights and seduction, but Errol Flynn's real passion was the bottle. The original ladies' man, lauded as the definitive symbol of masculinity and virility, Errol Flynn is remembered as the archetypal swashbuckler in films, playing heroes like Robin Hood and Captain Blood. Off-screen, however, his life was debauched, depraved, and daring to the highest extreme. A notorious womanizer, brawler, and cocaine user, he was also known for his love of the bottle. A drinking partner of Cuba's Fidel Castro himself, Flynn's fondness for alcohol was well documented. For example, a bachelor pad that he shared with actor David Niven in Malibu was so notorious for the copious amount of alcohol drunk there that it was nicknamed Cirrhosis by the Sea. He also hosted sex, alcohol, and cocaine-fueled parties on his private boat. He would even show up to his film set smashed, once drunkenly wagering the film crew $500 that he could bed his co-star Olivia de Havilland. His decadent lifestyle caused him to collapse in an elevator in his early 30s, after which a doctor told him that his heart and lungs had been damaged. He nevertheless continued in his overindulgence, and he died at the age of 50 of a heart attack, his body bloated, overweight, and stricken with cirrhosis.
Ready? Boys and girls, who listen to the...
Number 7, John Barrymore. Considered one of the greatest actors of his era, John Barrymore's brilliance was overshadowed by his dependency on alcohol. This classic actor of the early 1900s was from the famed Barrymore family of thespians and praised as one of the greatest of his generation. He became known for playing sympathetic alcoholic characters on film, ironic as he himself was a raging alcoholic. Although known for his fantastic Shakespearean enactments, his performance as Mr. Hyde, and later his role as Sherlock Holmes, his tragic youth and difficult later years escalated his drinking to the point that his second wife once caught him trying to drink her cologne. He appeared later on in a hit comedy film called Dinner at 8, directed by George Cukor, and released in 1933. In it, he starred in one of his first films as a drunkard, playing an alcoholic actor. However, it wasn't many years later that his career was finally ruined due to his habit of returning to the bottle, due to the effect that alcohol had on his memory. From the year 1936 on, he needed cue cards to complete his roles. A few of his roles would chronicle the tales of a man who sank into a life of drinking and debauchery, and his hand shook uncontrollably. In 1942, at the age of 60, struggling with cirrhosis, kidney disease, and chronic edema, he finally crumbled and died not too soon after.
So I'll get you a beer. He goes, finished. What? You drank 48 beers.
Number 6, Andre the Giant. His massive frame wasn't just filled with strength. Andre the Giant's legendary alcohol consumption shocked even his fellow wrestlers. Though he was known by many as the eighth wonder of the world, an intimidating French wrestler who stood almost 2.2 meters, that's 7.5 feet, and weighed around 227 kilograms, 500 pounds, it is his role as Fezzik in the family classic The Princess Bride that has cemented him in the minds and hearts of fans everywhere. In addition to his role in the 1987 film, he starred in Trading Mom, Mickey and Maude, Cohen the Destroyer, and several television shows. However, it was his legendary consumption of alcohol that has earned him a place on our list. He consumed somewhere around 7,000 calories a day. During one 6-hour session, he drank 119 standard bottles of beer before collapsing in the corridor of the hotel he was staying at. His drinking partners let him lie under a tarp they dragged over him. When one bar owner in Kansas City let Andre know he could stay as long as he kept drinking, he was still there at 5 a.m., having gone through some 40 vodka and tonics. Being one of the highest paid wrestlers of his time, much of his income was spent on beer and hard liquor. After a month of filming The Princess Bride, his bar bill totaled over $40,000. Although known by his friends as generally being a gentleman, under the influence, the Hulk was a force to be reckoned with. He once flipped a small car over with a few men inside who had the nerve to pick on him inside a bar, and another time, he and fellow wrestler Dusty Rhodes took off on a pair of those horse-drawn carriages through the streets of Manhattan. Despite the fact that Andre suffered from acromegaly, which was the main factor in his decline, his unhealthy appetite for booze was one of the main components of his harmful lifestyle, which experts say caused him to develop diabetes and die of heart failure much earlier than he otherwise might have at the age of 46.
You spent quite a lot of time here.
Don't blame him. Free drinks, I like it.
Yeah, try the blackjack table.
Number 5, Bernard Lee. You know him as M in the James Bond series, but Bernard Lee's real-life battle with alcohol led to shocking behavior behind the scenes. With 50 years of acting under his belt and over 100 films and television credits to his name, Lee certainly kept busy as a thespian. Starting at the age of 6 and dabbling in stage productions before becoming renowned in film, his most notable work is surely as M, the head of the British Secret Service in 11 of the James Bond movies. However, the tragic death of his beloved wife in a house fire, a vicious mugging, and unpaid debts caused Lee to sink into depression and alcohol abuse. In fact, His addiction was allegedly so strong that he was locked in his dressing room during breaks from the filming of the Edgar Wallace television series to prevent him from drinking. Still, Lee reportedly found a way. He hired a person to feed a straw through the keyhole, thus allowing him to enjoy it. In fact, prolific drinker Richard Burton purportedly admitted that he wasn't in the same league as Lee, who once drank him under the table. At the age of 73, Lee passed away due to stomach cancer, which can be and was most likely caused by his excessive alcohol consumption. Number 4. Dennis Price. How does a matinee idol go from the heights of fame to the depths of despair? Dennis Price's tragic story is a tale of self-destruction. Coming from an aristocratic family and boasting good looks and charm, there wasn't much standing in the way of this British actor's success. Becoming a matinee idol on stage and scoring it big later with one of the finest comedies to come out of England, 1994's Kind Hearts and Coronets, Price and his contemporaries Alex Guinness and James Mason seemed poised to take on international acclaim. However, it was then that the drinking began to get out of control. Perhaps because of the anguish of his failing marriage, his hidden homosexuality, and for other unknown reasons. In 1954, Price found himself in his best suit with his head in the oven of his apartment. Though that suicide attempt failed due to the timely intervention of a cleaning woman, Price began a much more gradual suicide that involved his use of alcohol. Though he went on to star in popular British comedies and military dramas, his co-stars claim that he would start on a crate of Guinness at breakfast and finish it by the end of the day, along with plenty of scotch. Reported to be drunk most of the time by his associates, he would faithfully show up to the studio with booze in a shopping bag, and he once ambled on stage during the first act of a play, performing the final one. Near the end of his life, his once suave persona and charismatic good looks had been eroded by his addiction to the bottle, and he died, not surprisingly, of liver cirrhosis. Number 3. Lillian Roth. Hollywood's tragic child star revealed the harrowing truth of addiction long before it was accepted as a disease. Lillian Roth, a former childhood starlet whose career was sidetracked by her lifestyle of excess, confessed to America on a hugely popular television program, This Is Your Life, that she had suffered for years with alcoholism and mental and emotional instability. Her autobiography, I'll Cry Tomorrow, detailed the pressure her parents placed on her as a child, pushing her into performance at age 6. Though Roth eventually converted to Catholicism, she never stopped identifying as a Jew. She was one of the first women to go public about her alcoholism, wrote Audrey Waxman in a piece on Jewish women and addiction, adding that Roth is credited with helping Americans to view alcohol addiction as a disease, not a vice. Number 2. William Holden. William Holden was one of Hollywood's biggest stars, but behind the scenes, his battle with alcoholism led to a tragic end. The handsome leading man, William Holden, grappled with alcohol addiction, which had an impact on both his personal life and career. As the 60s progressed, the good roles dried up for Bill, and his name no longer appeared on the top 10 list of box office stars. Beyond increasing competition from a new generation of stars, Holden's alcoholism was getting worse, an open secret in the industry which limited the offers he received. Bill had always been a heavy drinker, and now his advancing condition both fueled his descent and numbed his pain on the way down. Holden's career flourished in the 1950s and 60s with notable films such as Sabrina, 1954, The Bridge on the River Kwai, 1957, and The Wild Bunch, 1969. Despite his professional success, Holden struggled with alcoholism throughout his life. His addiction affected his career and personal life, contributing to a decline in his health and leading to fewer film roles in his later years. Number 1. Rita Hayworth. The glamorous Rita Hayworth wasn't just battling her past. She was fighting an addiction that would haunt her until the end. Rita Hayworth, a celebrated actress of Hollywood's golden age, struggled with alcohol addiction for much of her life. Her drinking problems began in the 1940s and were exacerbated by the personal and professional pressures she faced. Despite her glamorous public persona, Hayworth experienced significant turmoil in her private life, including multiple failed marriages and traumatic experiences. Her addiction significantly impacted her career and health. During her later years, her alcoholism masked the symptoms of what was later diagnosed as Alzheimer's disease. This misdiagnosis led to a lack of proper treatment for many years, compounding her struggles. Hayworth's daughter, Yasmin Aga Khan, later spoke about the challenges of watching her mother suffer from both alcoholism and Alzheimer's, heightening the emotional toll it took on their family. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood's boozy secrets, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more intriguing stories. And hey, why stop here? Check out our other videos. We've got plenty more juicy Hollywood tales waiting for you. See you in the next one.